Hi Year 10. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you how to create a plan for answering the unseen poetry question in the exam. Now, as you know, the unseen poetry question has two parts, question A and question B. So I'm going to show you how to produce a plan for both parts of the question. So you have the planning slide to fill in. So you can either make notes or fill in all of the boxes as I go through them. So first of all, we're going to look at a plan for question A. And the first thing that we need to look at is the thesis intro, the introduction here. So the first thing we need to think about is the key word that is in the question. So the question is, Back in the Playground Blues, how does the speaker present his feelings about his school days? So, I would say that the key word in this question is feelings. So I'm going to write that down. And I'm also going to give myself a definition of feelings. So, this is a person's emotional state or reaction to something. And that can be positive or negative. So I'm just going to label that as 1. And then the second thing that we need to think about is how that keyword links to the poem that we are looking at. So, in this poem, Mitchell, the poet, is expressing the feelings of fear he felt on the playground. And the playground is presented as a frightening place where he had a negative experience. I'm just going to put negative experience. Okay, so that's what we need to do for our thesis introduction. So you can pause the recording now and you can plan your own thesis introduction using my example to help you. Okay, so the second paragraph that we need to plan for is a structure paragraph. Now, because this is structure and not language, we don't need to use a direct quotation. A line number or stanza number will be good enough for this. So, the structure point that I want to make about the poem Back in the Playground Blues, well, I'm going to say that stanza 4 has shorter lines. And this part of the poem is describing the people that are being bullied. So during that stanza, that's where those people are being described. So this is important because that represents those people as being small and insignificant in comparison to the bullies. Okay, so that is my structure paragraph completed. You can pause the recording now and complete your own structure planning. Okay, so now you need to move on to your first language paragraph. So for this one, obviously you need to choose a quotation from the poem. So the quotation that I have chosen from the poem is, "It was broken, black tarmac, so that is the poet describing the playground. And I think broken suggests the harm that the bullies have caused. And dark, the dark colour of black, we can link that to those feelings that we talked about in the introduction that are in the question. So it's all about the poet's feelings. So the dark colour of black suggests feelings of sadness. Okay, so that is my first language paragraph completed. You can pause the recording now and complete your own. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our second language paragraph because we need 2 language paragraphs for this question. So we need to pick out another quote for this box. So the quote that I have chosen is 1,000 years away. If you read the poem, the speaker is talking about the distance between his mother and father. So I'm just going to write that down. And I think this shows that he felt isolated and alone as a child on the playground. Because he didn't have the protection of his parents. Okay, so that is my second language paragraph done. So if you want to pause the recording now, then you can complete your own language paragraph, picking out a quotation from the poem. So the final step in our plan is going to be the conclusion. And this is where we're going to talk about that keyword again, which was feelings. And we consider how well it's been explored in the poem and how the poet's feelings have been explored. So I think that the speaker is clearly reflecting on a negative experience at school. So he's reflecting negatively on his school days. So he feels that he had an awful experience because of the bullies, and we can see this through the language and the structure. Okay, so that is a full completed paragraph for question A of Unseen Poetry. So if you want to pause the recording now and finish off your own plan or finish making your notes, then you can do that now before we move on to question B. Okay, so we're just going to move on now to look at question B. So it's a similar type of plan, but there's a little bit less to do just because it's a shorter question and it's not worth as many marks, so you don't need to write and plan as much. So for our introduction sentence, we're just going to write one sentence in the box that sums up what both the poems are talking about. So both poems have used language and structure to express their feelings and talk about their experiences of bullying. So that's what we need for our introduction sentence. If you need to pause the recording now and you can complete your own introduction sentence for question B. Okay, so next we need to talk about the structure. Now remember, for this question, we're comparing two poems. So we need to find a structural point in each poem that we can then compare. So the first poem we're looking at is Back in the Playground Blues. And we're also looking at My Parents Kept Me. So I'm just going to write this for Back in the Playground Blues. And I'm going to talk about the fact that stanza 4 is shorter. And the other stanzas seem to surround it. If you look at the layout of the poem, you'll see what I mean. It's as though all the other lines are sort of surrounding stanza 4. And that makes it seem as if it's the bullies and they are standing around the victims. That's what that sort of represents, or seems to. So the next poem we need to talk about is My Parents Kept Me. So we also need to make a structural point for this poem. And the comparison I'm going to make is to do with the stanzas again. So if you look at this poem, you'll see that the 3 poems are of equal length. 3 stanzas, sorry. So I'm just going to put 3 stanzas of equal length in My Parents Kept Me. And this shows that the speaker wasn't afraid of the bullies. He felt that he was actually equal to them. So he wasn't afraid or intimidated. So that is my structure paragraph completed for question B. If you want to pause the recording now, and you can finish off your own notes or fill in the box for the structural plan. Okay, so next up we need to look at language. Now you notice for question B it talks about, you can talk about either similarities or differences. So for my language point, I want to talk about how both poems are using language to make the bullies seem fierce and like animals. So both bullies use language, both poets, use language to make the bullies seem fierce and like animals. So, Back in the Playground Blues, the quote that I have chosen is, "Tear off its 6 legs." Okay. And the reason I've chose that is just because I think it sounds really brutal, and I think it sounds like an animal attacking somebody. So brutal sounds like an animal attack. Then I also need to talk about "My parents kept me." And the quote that I've chosen for this poem is, "Sprang out behind hedges." And this to me suggests that they prey on people just like animals. So they sort of jump out on them and attack them, corner them. Okay, so that is my language planning box completed. If you need to pause the recording now, and you can finish off completing your language plan. Okay, so the last box we need to fill out is the conclusion. So this is where we sort of sum up what we think. And for the plan, we just need a simple sentence to sum up our ideas. And I think what I'm going to say is the fact that both poets present bullies in the same way. Because as I was saying, they're sort of presented like animals, they're really fierce and they intimidate people. So that's something that they're similar in that way, but they show that some people can stand up to them and some people can't. So the poets show that some people can stand up to them and some people can't. Okay, so that is my completed plan for question B. Okay, so that's the end of the video now, year 10. Make sure that you finish your own plans or finish making notes for this in preparation for your assessment in a couple of weeks' time. Good luck.